Kimmel won this battle. We've all seen that now. There are still some problems in the wider war. Activists do view the huge American pressure on Disney as a playbook for a range of future Trump clashes, which can go beyond free speech. But to begin our special report right now, remember, here's how it went down.
ABC has just announced that they are pulling late-night host Jimmy Kimmel's show off the air indefinitely.
These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC.
All they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that.
The recent increase in searches for the phrase cancel Disney Plus since ABC suspended Kimmel's show.
People spoke with their pocketbooks. They canceled Disney Plus and their Hulu subscriptions. All of it contributed to the fact that after only 6 days after being suspended, Jimmy Kimmel is returning to the airwaves.
This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
Many agreed. Kimmel is back because people stood up, and that made Disney respond. Of course, this began with Disney as a company that was clearly most worried about the U.S. government hurting its bottom line. And then, because of you and the people, Disney quickly found it was actually even more worried about its customers. Now remember, the richest, most powerful companies in the U.S. usually are quite rich and powerful because they operate in many different places. And those different countries have different laws and different systems of government. So when we hear that term, multinational companies, it's not just a description of where they operate. It's also a description of the different ways they have to operate. Because a company that wants to operate in China and the U.S. and Canada is going to have some different policies. On the business side, they tend to defend that. But what we just lived through in America shows the sad limits of that kind of capitalist approach. Now, Americans may not see this very much when it happens abroad, but many of these companies already have long histories of accommodating all kinds of autocratic leaders who have very different demands than, say, going to Canada and just running a theme park and paying your taxes. Russia and China are a little different. And that means we already know that these companies in the U.S. that are now facing more free speech and autocratic pressure under Trump than they did previously already know how and sometimes do undercut the values of free expression and the rule of law. They claim to follow them, of course, and some of them do more than others. But when you go abroad, it's pretty clear. Disney was not new to the process of quickly bending to a government demand if they thought that the leader was quite serious about making them do it or paying for it. Indeed, for the powerful government of China, it has previously altered and censored films to ensure its position there. It's also made deals under duress. It had the blockbuster Mulan, which led to a deal with the autocratic, no-democracy Chinese government, where Disney took the government's push to also get the rights to 2 Chinese films and open a theme park as part of the deal to stream that movie at all. Other companies have changed or censored references to Taiwan because the Chinese government wants to exert control over what people in and near China think and hear about Taiwan and its quest for more autonomy. Take Apple. Just last year, it pulled WhatsApp and Threads from the China App Store. That was under a government order. Apple would say they have to follow law in China, just like they have to follow law in the U.S. But that certainly is different from supporting free expression. Or Putin plays tough. Google and Apple also removed a voting app that was associated with the opposition against Putin in 2021. These are companies that want to operate everywhere. And again, to be clear and fair, some of them say, they would argue, it's better in many of these countries to have some tech and some Western media than none. But the point is, as we become more like a country that wants to censor or have the government decide what you can see on TV, as a guest put it tonight, these companies have some experience doing this for years.
Companies fear there is a lot of money left to lose when it comes to China. Marriott Hotels firing an hourly employee just for liking a tweet about free Tibet.
Google and Apple blocked Russians from downloading the main opposition party's app.
A voting app that's linked to Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny.
Really big, rich, powerful American companies But in this case, they are doing the work of the Putin government to shut down the political opposition in Russia.
That is how it has worked. And so for people inside the U.S. who were somewhat surprised, angry, outraged that Disney, a company that says it is about free expression, that owns a big news organization, that does fund and release a lot of art and expression and comedy and criticism, people were surprised to see Disney do it. And that may be because they were thinking of U.S. Disney or U.S. Disney pre-MAGA. But Disney abroad, Disney in China, Disney in Russia, tech companies in Russia, that might feel a little different. And for those following, it's not new. And there are artists who work with these companies but have also spoken out because they've been concerned about the global effect on human rights and free expression. Take the famed director-writer Judd Apatow, who told us this.
What I perceive as more chilling is a corporate type of censorship that people don't really notice, which is a lot of these giant corporate entities have business with countries around the world, Saudi Arabia or China, and they're just not going to criticize them, and they're not going to let their shows criticize them, or they're not going to air documentaries that go deep into truthful areas because they just make so much money.
Facts. Judd Apatow was saying that while working with some of those companies. That, like Kimmel, is a type of intellectual fortitude, to call it out. And his point there was subtle and had nothing to do with the current issues around MAGA. He was speaking back then, 2020, about what he called that insidious type of expression corruption, that you don't see the documentary, that it doesn't get made or it doesn't get streamed. And so the agenda of Saudi Arabia and China doesn't just work over there. We don't control, and they have country autonomy, but that it affects us here as well, affects all of us. Now, Hollywood still talks a lot about free expression, artistic expression. The Motion Picture Association leader wrote in 2016, the First Amendment right to free speech undergirds all other right, whether it's confronting tyrants abroad, which is the subject right now that we're discussing, quote, or pushing the limits and buttons of our society's cultural understanding. Motion pictures and TV often dare to say the unspeakable. Hear, hear. That's Chris Dodd, the former senator, and he was representing Hollywood's interests. But Hollywood's interests morph depending on where they are, as I'm telling you. And so abroad, not so much. China is also now the largest movie market in the world. So a lot of films need to do some business there if they want to be global blockbusters. One producer saying studios might not even pursue an idea if they think it will make the Chinese government mad. That's that preemptive chilling effect, inhibiting filmmakers from using any storyline that might offend Chinese officials. Number one, that's a problem. Number two, if Trump's FCC gets its way, the problem over there will be more of a problem here. Here's how one Disney executive put it.
We're in the movie business, and we're making movies that are designed to be seen by an appreciative, hopefully, audience that will enjoy our movie. We don't wish to be political, and to get dragged into a political discussion, I would argue, is sort of inherently unfair. It's not what we do. We're not politicians. It's not what we do. We're not a governmental organization. We're making movies.
It is unfair. But that dragging that China is doing and that other American politicians may want to do, Brendan Carr certainly sees his role in the government as deciding what's on your TV, even though he had a big loss. That dragging may be unavoidable if you are in a country where the government wants to control free expression in the companies, wants to grind down the opposition, not just the people who self-identify as the opposition, but others who might just make art or even jokes that the government decides are over their line. And so some of these companies are understandably on the defense. Some, and I say this with all seriousness, are dealing with international law. And so when you operate over there, you generally have to comply with those laws. But there are still lines and tough questions, because Disney could have said, well, we think this is what we got to do under what the FCC's current view of the law is. That was kind of where they started. But very quickly, they found a different energy, which is maybe we could win this fight in court, and it's not the law yet. Now, Netflix, widely respected company, supported a lot of arts, a lot of documentaries. They did pull one episode of Hasan Minhaj's comedy show in 2019 under threat from Saudi Arabia. Again, a legal threat, which said, well, they'd have to deal with that in that country. The comedian had raised questions about the infamous killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, Disney is concerned about the government above. It was also concerned about some companies below, although it won that fight with the affiliates late last week. The legal consequences, though, from fighting with Donald Trump, for backing Kimmel's rights, this could play out further. Here was what Kimmel said.
I've had the opportunity to meet and spend time with comedians and talk show hosts from countries like Russia, countries in the Middle East, who tell me they would get thrown in prison for making fun of those in power, and worse than being thrown in prison. They know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. The government threat to silence a comedian the president doesn't like is anti-American. That's anti-American. And I am so glad we have some solidarity on that.
There's plenty of talk about what is wrong with America. A lot of our politics, which have a negative, divisive hue, are about that and flying accusations. Let me tell you something positive, to echo Jimmy Kimmel. We saw a lot of people agree on something that is right about America, free speech and free expression. But when they went to the multinationals, they didn't have 100% agreement. They had to rise up and fight to vindicate that First Amendment right, which so many Americans across time, space, and ideology have come to agree is the better way to do it.